Introduction. Composting is a very old art, and some of its basic principles have been appreciated and used in practice for centuries. In recent years, however, rapid progress has been made in scientific studies of the underlying biological and chemical processes involved in composting. These studies have served to clarify several factors which can act to produce finished compost, which is both valuable to agriculture and relatively safe from the viewpoint of public health. There is an important relationship between sanitation and agriculture in all parts of the world. In agricultural areas, the utilization of human and animal wastes is of great importance from both the public health and the agricultural points of view. This is because of a. the ever-increasing difficulties in disposing of great accumulations of wastes, b. the ever-increasing threat to soil fertility, and c. the intensive ever-increasing waste demand for agricultural lands to produce more food. Sir Albert Howard and his associates first suggested modern composting through his course in Agricultural Testament 1940. They studied in India, which was carried forward by Acharya and Subramanian, further has been investigated extensively by Scott and Van Vuren by Gautas and his associates, Magahe, Galuik, and Card, at the University of California, and by many others in different parts of the world. Decomposition. Decomposition or stabilization of organic matter by biological action is the most valuable portion of life cycle on our planet. In recent times, man has attempted to control and directly utilize the process for sanitary disposal and reclamation of organic waste material, and this process has been termed composting, and the final product of composting has been called compost. Generally speaking, there are two processes, a. aerobic decomposition and stabilization, and b. anaerobic fermentation. In these processes, microbial community feed upon organic materials such as vegetable matter, animal manure, night soil, and other organic refuse and convert the waste to a more stable form. When organic material is decomposed in the presence of oxygen, the process is called aerobic. In aerobic stabilization, living organisms, which utilize oxygen, feed upon the organic matter and develop cell protoplasm from the nitrogen. From the nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, and other required nutrients. Much of the carbon serves as a source of energy for the organisms and is burned up and respired as carbon dioxide. Since carbon serves both as a source of energy and as an element in the cell protoplasm, much more carbon than nitrogen is needed. Generally about 2/3 of the carbon is required as carbon dioxide, CO2, while the other third is combined with nitrogen in the living cells. If the excess of carbon over nitrogen in organic materials being decomposed is too great, biological activity diminishes, and several cycles of organisms may be required to burn up most of the carbon. When some of the organisms die, their stored nitrogen and carbon become available to other organisms. The utilization of nitrogen from the dead cells by other organisms to form new cell material requires the burning of excess carbon to CO2. Thus, the amount of carbon is required, and the limited amount of nitrogen is recycled. Finally, when the ratio of available carbon to available nitrogen is sufficiently low, nitrogen is released as ammonia. Under favorable conditions, some ammonia may be oxidized to nitrate. Phosphorus, potash, and various micronutrients are also essential for biological growth. These are normally present in more than adequate amounts in compostable materials and present no problem, hence, a discussion of their metabolism by the biological cells will not be included. The cycle of nitrogen and carbon in aerobic decomposition is structured in cycle of nitrogen and carbon in aerobic decomposition. Putrefactive breakdown of organic material takes place anaerobically. Anaerobic living organisms in metabolizing nutrients break down the organic compounds by a process of reduction. As an aerobic process, the organisms use nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients in developing cell protoplasm but reduce organic nitrogen to organic acids and ammonia. Carbon from organic compounds which is not utilized in the cell protein is liberated mainly in the reduced form of methane, CH4. A small portion of carbon may be respired as CO2. This process takes place in nature as in the decomposition of organic muds at the bottom of marshes and in buried organic material to which oxygen does not have access. The marsh gas which rises is largely CH4. Intensive reduction of organic matter by putrefaction is usually accompanied by disagreeable odors of hydrogen sulfide and of reduced organic compounds which contain sulfur, such as mercaptans. Since anaerobic destruction of organic matter is a reduction process, the final product, humus, is subject to some aerobic oxidation when put on the soil. This oxidation is minor, takes place rapidly, and is of no consequences in the utilization of the material on the soil. The cycle of nitrogen and carbon in anaerobic decomposition is structured in Cycle of nitrogen and carbon in anaerobic decomposition.